Good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from SBS Monk Training Center here in Taiping. Today I would like to talk about the question whether monastics, like myself, are protecting or corrupting the Sāsana, the Buddha's dispensation. And I've already heard some of you worried a little bit when you heard the word corrupting the Sāsana. How could monks and nuns and monastics corrupt the Sāsana? Don't worry. If you're a layperson, you don't have to worry at all. And if you're a monk or nun, most likely, hopefully, you also don't have to worry. And if you do worry that this could be about you, or maybe you have good reasons to worry in this case. But I think I will keep it a bit general, but I would like to touch on some important principles how monastics can contribute to the longevity, flourishing, and beauty of the Sāsana. Or the opposite, to the detriment. Depends very much. So the short answer to the questions, or to the question whether monastics protect or corrupt the Sāsana, the short answer to the question is yes. Yes, we are doing both. It depends, It depends how you live your monk's life or your monastic life. I look at it in this way. It seems monastic life is like an amplifier. It amplifies whatever good actions we undertake for the benefit of the Sāsana, for the spreading of the Buddha's teachings, and for the sharing of the Dhamma, of the true Dhamma. So in this way, monastics are taken often very seriously and therefore have quite a great potential to work for the good of the Sāsana. But there's also a flip side of the coin. If monastics behave or act in ways that are not inspiring, then it will have very detrimental effects to the Sāsana. More even than if one would have remained just as a layperson. Because people don't expect that you know all the details of the Buddha's teachings, or they don't expect of you the highest standards of virtue, of conduct. But for monks, the expectation, rightly so, I think, is a bit higher. And then it can be very off-putting, and people can lose their trust and faith when monks act in ways that are not suitable for monastics. And that trust in the Sāsana can diminish in this way. This principle, with opportunity and a level of authority also comes responsibility. So the credibility that we are given, we have to use that well and responsively. And in this way, monks and monastics and nuns can work for the benefit of the Sāsana. In fact, the original title of this talk was meant to be Monk Training at SBS. But this title, on second thought, I found not only maybe a bit boring or not so interesting, but also it provides a solution, monk training, to maybe a non-apparent problem, to a non-apparent cause. Why do we need monk training in the first place? And for many questions of daily life, even for decision making, we can actually use the method and methodology of the Four Noble Truths. Not just the classic interpretation, just the classic way, suffering, its cause, freedom of suffering and its cause, but that principle can also be applied to all kinds of topics. A problem, like suffering, problem, what's the cause for this issue? Then, number 3, can you imagine a state of freedom from that problem? How would that look like? And then the cause for that. What would I have to do? What can we do to achieve that freedom, that solution, that solving of this problem? the path of practice. So I would like to use this as the framework for our elaboration on this topic, on the responsibility and benefit that monastics can bring to the Sāsana. So coming back to the first noble truth, what's the problem? Well, many people have pointed out to me that Buddhism, especially in Buddhist majority countries, but I think you've heard even in Malaysia, Buddhism seems to be in decline. And especially in Buddhist countries, it's not easy to hold these large majorities of 95% Buddhists. So it's natural with globalization that other religions and other groups also will become more prominent. And not only in Malaysia, also in Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Burma, there's concerns about the reducing and diminishing number of Buddhists. And one can ask oneself, what's the reason for that, So this is the problem, that's the dukkha, you can say. Why are less and less people interested in Buddhism? We can see in the statistics that in Buddhist majority countries, other religions are actually on the rise. So that's a fact, it's just an assessment of the situation. So then comes the question, what's the origin of that? What's the origin of this dukkha, if you want to call it? Or in our context, since I would like to focus here on the role that monastics can play, how can the behavior of monastics negatively influence or corrupt or shorten the longevity of the Sāsana? And I would like to distinguish here between two categories. The first one is when monastics engage in activities that are the direct opposite of the Buddha's teachings, of the Dhamma Vinaya. It's very clear that's not only to his or her own harm, but also to the harm of many others. So, obvious examples, if monastics engage in criminal activities, money laundering, child abuse. These are very serious things and will of course be very bad for the reputation of the monastics, of the Sangha as a whole, and even for the reputation of the Buddha's teachings. Not everybody draws this fine distinction, it was just this person. No, people will say, these monks, they are like this. So it's very important to consider the effects that one's action can have on others. So criminal activities obviously will be detrimental for the longevity and inspiration of monks and as well as lay followers alike. Or teaching a form of Dhamma which is not the real Dhamma, is not really the Buddha's teaching. Maybe the monastic himself or herself has learned it this way or believes that this is the Buddha's teachings, but because maybe of a lack of depth of study, depth of practice, or maybe not even interested much only in Buddhism, studies also many other things, and therefore misrepresenting the Buddha and his teachings. So that's again an action that will reduce the longevity of the true Dhamma, of the pure teachings of the Buddha that are designed to lead to liberation. Or when monastics don't keep their precepts. You see the monk eating in the afternoon, or going to a coffee shop, drinking alcohol. Would that be inspiring? Will that increase the longevity of the Sāsana? No. And every now and then, even in Buddhist countries, one of these scandals arises, and it's always heart-wrenching, when you hear that. Because it just takes a few who really can have a really bad influence on the reputation of what is otherwise a very beautiful lifestyle, a very beautiful and meaningful project. And it's also almost a bit a sense of hypocrisy, you can say, if you see monastics sitting there on the podium and then administering the 5 precepts when lay people come on Uposatha days. But then they themselves, they don't keep their precepts. So one could say there's a lack of integrity. You should do as you say, not just teach others to keep their precepts, but then the monks don't. So again, that will not lead to inspiration. Or when monks or nuns or monastics, when they live a livelihood or earn money, while accepting money is in itself already problematic in the light of the monks' rules, but not just that, sometimes also they earn a living by giving out lottery numbers, or fortune telling, or selling amulets, very powerful amulets supposedly, or relics, palm reading. Amazing what monks are experts in nowadays. Now we don't have much of that here in Malaysia. I'm very happy about that. But you find those things, especially in traditional Buddhist countries. All of those things you see from time to time. So it's not leading to the longevity of the Sāsana. It's not inspiring. It's not the right way for monks to spend their time. So these are the more obvious examples. And then there are a second group, which I would call like activities that are not opposite, but are also not in line with the Buddha's teachings. For example, getting engaged in politics. Well, we don't have an explicit rule that forbids that, being interested or having conversations or having strong opinions. There's not a monk rule for that, but it's clearly going in a direction away from the Dhamma, away from the path to liberation. It's not supportive. It can be a distraction, or it's just a waste of time. Another thing also, when monastics are very outspoken about their political beliefs, now traditionally also people come to see us and ask for advice and for our opinion on all kinds of matters. But if a monk is not known to be affiliated with this or that party, then people from the other fraction, from the other party, they will not go to see this monk because he belongs to the other group. So then you have this distinction and division. Again, it's not suitable, not necessary for monks to go into this direction. Or engaging in social causes, And these are often good endeavors, you fight for animal rights, or gay rights, women rights, global warming activism. Now each of these are in themselves good and worthwhile causes. But then this is very useful and suitable for Buddhist lay followers to help out if they see they have an influence and interest, no problem. But then for us monastics, we are actually going forth for the sake of striving for the goal of liberation. Not in order to make the world a better place. Not in order to improve samsara and make it more cozy in samsara. Now actually there are so many people who are very qualified, very good in doing that already. It does not require the monks and nuns to do that. Actually we are given a privilege to step out of society and dedicate ourselves to the practice of the Dhamma and also to the sharing of the Dhamma. That's actually what we're meant to do. And then of course, if a monk or nun does not learn the Dhamma, not only one does not know how to practice for oneself, but then also one doesn't know, one will also very likely teach others who come to seek one's counsel and advice, teachings that are not in line with the Buddha's teachings. Again, that will reduce the longevity of the true Buddha's teachings. Even though it might sound like, it could be the Dhamma, but exactly because it sounds as if it could be, that's why it's so easily mistaken and confused. Or lastly, maybe in this category, you could also say when monks live a very lavish or somewhat luxurious lifestyle, usually also we don't find it so inspiring. Even though we don't have rules for all those things, You could live in a very well-equipped hut or kuti or place with nice furniture and all branded items. And one could live lavishly even as a monk without breaking any rules. Yet obviously it's contrary to the principle of giving up, going against one's cravings and desires, attachments, sense pleasures. And it's also not very inspiring for those who support us. The monks should be easy to support. So again, that would be a lifestyle that is not inspiring and therefore not supportive for the longevity of the Sāsana, because if people lose their trust, their faith, then the support will diminish, and then the spread of the Dhamma and the potential that monastics would have to spread, make the Dhamma known, and also practice it on their own would not be made use of. So this, I would say, we could look at the causes for the misery or for the suffering. Engaging in activities that are directly opposed to the Dhamma or not really leading to the goal. But then there's also the good news, like in the third noble truth, that is about sukha, about happiness. Because monastics can also be a force and power for positive influence, for protection, for strengthening and increase and longevity of the Sāsana. How? Well, by learning the Dhamma, learning the Dhamma and then putting it into practice. In this way, a person becomes like a living manifestation of almost like a living proof that the Dhamma works. And that in itself can be huge inspiration and a huge benefit for whomever one comes in contact with. And then also because he or she has realized the Dhamma for herself, then the Dhamma that she teaches will also be the true Dhamma, the real teaching of the Buddha. Not some fake quote from Facebook or WhatsApp, but the true teachings of the Buddha. And putting them into practice by meditation and also in one's daily life. As well as a monastic who keeps his precepts, who is firm in his precepts, does not make exceptions for minor trivial things just to get a little bit more convenience here and there. No, we try to uphold them and adhere to them and take them dearly. And in this way, we will also reap the benefits. That is mostly actually for the benefit of the monastic himself. But with that foundation, you can build. On the sila, you can build your samadhi and your wisdom on top. It's like a house. If the foundation is shaky or not on solid ground, well, the first wind comes or a little bit of an earthquake, the whole thing falls apart. So likewise, when the foundation, the sila, is strong, that provides a proper foundation. And whatever you build on top will remain for a long time. Living simply, the opposite from before, doesn't have to be austere to the degree that you can barely survive, but a general simple lifestyle. Fair enough. And then also monastics often have opportunity to support the Buddhist community at large. For example, sometimes you're invited for bereavement service after somebody has passed away. In fact, just yesterday here in Taiping, We were invited for a bereavement service. The monks will counsel a little bit, will speak to the family about dying, death, what happens after death, rebirth. Also provide a way of coming to terms with one's own mortality and the mortality of one's beloved ones. So this is a social service, you can say, that is still very much in line with the Buddha's teachings about impermanence and the imminence of death. Also, monastics, by necessity, they also make themselves available as a field of merit. So if the monastic keeps his precepts, is practicing the Dhamma, then a gift or support given to him or her also supposedly brings good results, not just for the monastic, but also for the giver. Then also sharing the Dhamma. That's actually traditionally how we hear the Dhamma. At the Buddha's time, in the first hundreds of years, you couldn't just go to YouTube and listen to a Dhamma talk or download an e-book, read the Buddha's teachings on a book. No, you would have to see a monastic, a monk, or a nun who has memorized the Dhamma and then can reproduce it and teach it and spread it in this way. So again, large opportunity for monastics here to work to the benefit of the Sāsana by sharing the wonderful teachings of the Buddha. And like we said earlier, just by practice, even if somebody does not teach actively, just by being a living example and manifestation of the Dhamma, that in itself can be very inspiring. Remember the case of Venerable Assaji, who became an arahant, and then Sariputta, who was not yet a monk, met him, and then already from the distance he could see, wow, this monk is different. The way he walks, the way he conducts himself, and he straight away was drawn to this Assaji just by his demeanor and his peacefulness. So in the same way, a monk or a monastic or anyone, for that reason, who practices well, you can be an inspiration to others, even without saying anything. Just by the way you act and interact with others, not necessarily by giving long-winded Dhamma talks. Yeah. In fact, some of these words count less than what we do, how we act and interact. But then how to do that? This will be the fourth noble truth. How do we achieve that? How can we help monastics? What can monastics do in order to fulfill their potential? And this is where monk training comes in. I always say, ordination alone is not enough. You just change from blue jeans to robes. Yeah, outwardly speaking, you become a monastic. But if you still act and think and interact in the same way as before, not much difference to that state of earlier. So ordination itself does not make you a contributor for the longevity of the Sāsana. You often need a supportive community, both monastic community but also laity, who work together to bring out the best in each and every one. So just like top sports people or musicians or even elite soldiers, they train in a team. They train often as a small group to middle-sized group, and they train together and they polish their skills. Sometimes we call hotbeds. Sometimes you find, why is this tennis club bringing up top-ranked tennis players year after year? What is different from that place to these others? So they have a certain way of practice, a certain way of training. They don't just give you a tennis racket and say, okay, now you just play. No, there will be a teacher, a trainer, and other people who are working together with whom you can practice. So this is where monk training comes in. Ordination alone is not sufficient. And that's why we have here in the Bing SBS Monk Training Center. And according to our constitution and vision and mission statement, it says there that SBS Monk Training Center is a sanctuary for Buddhist monks to deepen their knowledge, understanding, and practice of the Buddha's teachings. So it's not only for monks who are already monks, but it's also a place where, as a lay practitioner, you can come and find out whether monastic life could be suitable for you. You don't have to have decided already beforehand. And to live up to this aspiration for well-trained monastics, we provide training courses, where either monks who have ordained here can join, or even monks who come from other monasteries on a later time during their monastic life. It could be after 5 years, 10 years, or even more than 20 years, and who voluntarily would like to sign up for some of the courses that we provide. So what are the kind of practices that are kind of cornerstones of SPS Monk Training Center? I would like to share a little bit with you. The first one, very important one, meditation. Meditation both in theory, but also practice, of course. So this also includes experimenting and gaining a level of proficiency with different meditation techniques, different methods, and then to apply them skillfully in whatever situation and purpose we need it. Even though I would recommend having one mula kammadana, one main meditation object, but there are times in your life where you need to counter certain hindrances, certain difficulties, and you can use certain meditation methods that can help you at that time. So it is helpful to have a small toolbox, meditation tools that you can apply to different situations or different times of the day. Just like a skilled cook does not only cook many things, but he also observes what the king or for whomever he cooks, whatever the person takes, and then provides those things that the person likes and takes and consumes. Likewise, we should know the signs of our mind and know, now is the time where my mind needs to be tranquilized. Maybe very restless, so it's a time to rest, to tranquilize, to calm the mind. But sometimes the mind is quite calm already. It's actually a time where you might almost fall asleep, in meditation especially. Then this could be a time where you might need a meditation method that can energize the mind, give you a sense of joy and piti, sukha. So not always necessarily the same method will bring the desired results. So that's why I said earlier, a little bit like different tools for different situations. So learning about meditation, both in theory, what can I do when this happens, what can I do when that happens, but then also, of course, in practice. That's a very central element of what we do here. Then also Dhamma knowledge, very important, that we also know the Buddha's teachings, because that provides the framework and the right perspective, the right attitude about the practice. Not just about the practice, also the right attitude towards the scriptures themselves is also important. To be able to distinguish, what comes from the Buddha, what comes from eminent monks, from eminent scholars or other practitioners, and there can be a different value that we attribute to these different layers of authority or layers of information. Some are earlier, some are later. How do we deal when there are differences in different scriptures? To which one to give priority? So these are all things that the Buddha actually laid down already systems for that. And that we often do in our sutta readings and Vinaya classes, where we evaluate also not only the content, but also the reliability of different sources. The same about Vinaya, the monk's rules. I just have to say, even though here in our conversation I always speak about monks, because SBS is a monk training center, but that does not mean that these principles cannot also be applied to nuns and female monastics. So Vinaya knowledge are very important also, knowing the regulations by which we abide, and then also a healthy attitude about the Vinaya that can be fueled by trust in the Buddha, in his wisdom, and also being able to see that sometimes the letter of a rule could be different from the spirit, and then how to deal with that tension a little bit. Because sometimes when you just go after the letter of a rule, you might, technically speaking, not commit any offense. There are ways around how you can avoid committing certain offenses, but then the spirit of the rule is still not fulfilled, because it's like a little bit this loophole way, like a lawyer might think, to avoid certain falling into certain breaking the law in certain areas. So it's important not only to follow the letter, but also take the spirit behind the rules into account, know the origin stories. And then it helps not only the monk or nun to understand the reason for the Vinaya rules, but also when people ask us, why are you doing like this? Why are you walking barefoot when you go to the village? Or why do we have to offer the food all the time? Why can you not just put it on the table? If you have no answer for these kind of questions, people will also scratch their heads and say, very strange, very strange preferences, these monks and nuns. But once the monk knows and can explain, and often we didn't understand, there's actually good reasons for these things. Why do we have to get the food offered into our hands? Why can you not just put it on the table over there? In fact, you can offer things to a monastic by put it on the table or anywhere and just say, Bande, this umbrella, I would like to offer it to you, it's yours. He says, sadhu, sadhu, and then that's it. You don't have to offer it into his hands. But why is it then different with food or medicine? Well, suppose there's a misunderstanding. Maybe I thought you were offering this umbrella to me, but actually you were just parking it there for yourself for later. But now I've taken it. Then tomorrow you come and say, where's my umbrella? Then, since I have it, I can say, sorry, I thought it's for me. Then you can return it, right? But with food, how am I going to return the food after I've eaten it? I mean, we could try, but you might not want it. So that's why for food and medicine, the guideline is a bit stricter in that it has to be really, really 100% clear. This is really meant for this monastic. And by saying, you give it into his hand or something connected with his hand, like a bowl, is a very sure way to make sure it's really just for him. There can be no misunderstanding. So once we understand the reason behind a Vinaya rule, it's actually quite intuitive and makes sense often. So that's another important aspect of monk training, especially here in SBS. Learning not only about the Vinaya, but also the attitude related to the Vinaya. Also, a certain degree of skill in practical things is helpful. Here in SBS, even before ordination, the candidates have to make their own robes. We don't give them ready-made robes, even though we have spare robes, but I want them to learn how to sew the robes, how to be able to make them on their own. And nowadays we can use sewing machines, but even though working with a sewing machine still requires practice. And for most of us, at least for myself, when I was growing up, I did not learn how to handle a sewing machine. So it takes a bit of practice, but it's a very useful skill actually. And then later on, wherever the monk is, he can repair his own clothes, Sometimes you go through a forest, through a jungle, and then some thorns sticking out, and you hang with the rope there. Very easy, this cloth, is flapping. You have to get hung somewhere, and then you have a hole in it. And then the monk knows how to put a patch on it, how to repair it. So it's a very useful skill. Don't always depend on others so much. Or even with brooms, we make our own brooms. Just get the lidi, so you call lidi here in Malaysia, no? Get the broomsticks, get a bamboo stick, and then put them together with a string usually. And that again takes a bit of practice, but you can make much better brooms than what you can buy in the shop. I was so surprised actually. First time they got us some brooms from a shop locally here. There was a broomstick, and there was this blue cover, a blue plastic cover, and then the bristles, the lidi inside that blue plastic cover. And then I used it 2 times, or I think almost the first time. After a few sweeps, or half the broomsticks the lidi are already falling out. I thought, how can this person make a business with such brooms? So we went back and made our own brooms again. And it's an important skill to have, especially for forest monks. It's part of our training and of our practice. Also how to live out in the open, How to survive in a forest or under a tree. How do you protect yourself from snakes or scorpions? So these are all things that most of us, since they have grown up in cities, urban area, the things that we have to learn. Or we can learn, we don't have to. But it can be useful skills, especially if you want to go on tudong, hiking, just stay in forests, mountains. So it's good to know how to survive there. How to find water, how to make drinking water, things like that. So these are the basics. But then there's also, about learning the Dhamma, also helpful if you develop some skills in research. Do you know how to clarify questions for yourself? Or when maybe preparing for a Dhamma talk, you need to find some quotes from the Buddha. So how can you find those? There's so many suttas, so many passages. So how do you find them? Or if you want to clarify, what's the meaning of this word? You have to see it in different contexts. So nowadays we have digital tools for that. And it's good to have some familiarity with them, that you know how the software works. And you don't have to memorize everything in Pali nowadays anymore. You can just key it in, and then get search results, and then evaluate them. In this way, the monk over time also is meant to become more and more independent, also of his teacher. Because in the end, the goal should be that you can live on your own and be fully sufficient and can clarify, can understand the Dhamma by your own practice or by looking things up in the texts. And for that purpose, also a basic level of Pali knowledge is also helpful. Because many of those tools do make use of Pali texts. So if one knows no Pali, then you can't make use of these tools because all the search results will come in Pali language. So basic familiarity with the grammar of Pali is also something that we have courses here, and where throughout the course of the first 5 years as a monk will learn about. Not necessarily a newly ordained monk straight away, but slowly, gradually. Yeah. So we don't have to become Pali scholars, but basic Pali I would say is helpful and important for the monk to acquire over time. And then for those who are really interested in it, they can on their own go deeper in their Pali studies. Another important aspect, not only in monasteries, but I think everywhere, is right speech, and conversation skills, beyond just being silent. If you go on a retreat, right speech is fulfilled by being silent. But actually, right speech can be much broader than just being silent. It's speech that unites those who are divided, that is truthful, meaningful, connected with the goal, helpful, at the right time, spoken with loving kindness. And that requires practice. And there are even out in the world also good tools around. Maybe you've heard about nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg. But it's also something that one can practice. There's a system of practice, certain guidelines that one can try to incorporate into one's conversations, especially when there are difficult conversations. You want to admonish someone or point something out, then it's helpful if you can do that skillfully. So these are all things that even in monasteries we also need. Another area is also developing skills in verbal and also digital presentation of the Dhamma. And here in SBS, normally the newly ordained monks will not give Dhamma talks or large speeches, but we can practice already in that among our monastics, they can practice giving smaller sharings of Dhamma, and then they will get feedback afterwards. We analyze a little bit what can be improved, both not only in the content of the Dhamma, but also the style of delivery. So to make it interesting and engaging. And then after a few years, the person will also feel confident to share the Dhamma at occasions when there's an invitation, maybe for a Dhamma talk or for a retreat even, that the monk feels confident and would know how to do that, to help and give something back to society. Monks have been supported. It's good to give them time, not straight away to push monastics into becoming teachers. But then, over time, it's also nice if they can give something back, if they want. And many want, actually. So this is also something that can be practiced and trained, and where we give our support for that. And nowadays, Dhamma sharing happens not only verbally, often also you can go to a Buddhist blog or a website and answer Dhamma questions there. So this is also something, not for newly ordained monks, but then maybe Majjhima monks or around 5 Vassa, they can also start answering questions there and develop some skills in this area. For newly ordained monks, I think it's better to not get too much into technology and internet, because there can be such a strong pull, and many have anyway a history of almost like internet addiction before they become monks. So it's good to give them some distance and not get them sucked in again so quickly into this area. But then for providing Dhamma talks, some can provide slides, presentations, some PowerPoint to support what we are communicating, to support the teachings of the Buddha. That makes it easier to memorize, to understand, and also to share. So there are also skills related to that. How do you make a presentation like this? Likewise with writing skills. Now some of the monastics, they are actually quite knowledgeable, and they on their own can write quite nice essays about the Dhamma already. And so there also we can give support and train how to write a paper. What should be in the introduction, what should be in the body, how do you structure an argument. Also now there's Dhamma sharing skills on a Buddhist blog or website or chat group. Again, These are things that are often more relevant for a bit more senior monks, not for newly ordained ones. But again, these are all ways of giving something back and of sharing the Dhamma, either verbally, directly, or by making use of these digital doors. So the way I look at it is that this whole aspect of training and learning is a lifelong process. And SPS Monk Training Center is a place where not just junior monks and newly ordained monks can learn something, but where even a 5 Vassa, 10 Vassa or 20 Vassa monk can find something where he can benefit from and maybe also contribute. So it's a kind of win-win situation. So then, how does a typical newly ordained monk spend his first period in monk training? And it's very clear to candidates who ordain in SPS that actually we don't do temporary ordination. So they're meant to, if somebody aspires to be a monk for a long time and to undergo training here, there's an expectation that for at least 5 years, the person is willing to commit himself, maybe not necessarily to be in SPS continuously for 5 years, but to coordinate oneself with SPS, with the teacher, and to spend probably the majority of time here. And then sometimes also I find it good if monks get experience in other monasteries, especially since we are here not in a Buddhist country. I think it's also valuable to spend some time either in Thailand, Burma, Sri Lanka. So typically would be that first Vassa after ordination, the first year you spend in SPS, second year either in Burma, Thailand, Sri Lanka, one of the good monasteries that we have connection already with, where we know the practice is good standards of Vinaya, then I would send a monk over to that place. Then comes back again after half a year, 1 year, third Vassa in SPS. Number 4 can again be an outside year, and then the 5th Vassa back in SPS. So in this way, you spend more than half in SPS, but also you get already to see a little bit also from other traditions. And for foreigners who have to go on visa runs from time to time, they anyway have to go either to Thailand, Singapore, periodically to renew the visa for Malaysia. Actually, we have a second model also. Turns out that some people like it so much in SPS or in Malaysia, they don't even want to go to, like I said earlier, to Thailand, Burma, or anywhere, even in Malaysia. So then they request, there's a second way how we can do it, is that somebody spends the first 2 years continuously in SPS, and then spends only 1 year outside, the third Vassa, and 4 and 5 is back again to SPS. So in this way he gets the maximum amount of time within Malaysia and SPS. So this is on a case-by-case basis, also where we work together with the student according to his needs and inclinations. I would also like to highlight that SPS since 2018 has become an international monk training center. And as many of you know, we have hosted quite a variety of monks from different backgrounds, from different countries. Had monks here from Australia, Austria, well, like myself, Canada, Czech Republic, Germany, Myanmar, Russia, South Korea, Sri Lanka, Thailand. This was all already in the first Vassa. This was already in 2019, I think. Also USA. Yeah. So in addition to Malaysians and Westerners, I actually also see great value that monks from each of the 3 main Theravada countries, we have them also here, often on a rotation basis. So 1 monk from Burma, 1 from Sri Lanka, and Thailand. And in this way, actually, the Sangha can learn from each other's different backgrounds. cultural backgrounds, Buddhist backgrounds. And sometimes you can discover your own conditioning by exposing yourself to other traditions or to other cultures. So this is helpful not only for the Westerners, but also for the Malaysians who come to train here to get each other's conditioning checked by living together with others who might think differently in some areas. And sometimes you discover much better ways of doing things than that what we are used to. So in this way, Westerners, Asians can learn and support each other very beautifully. I always find it very rewarding, actually, to work with one's cultural conditioning and learn from each other. And I can see some typical qualities where the Westerners actually, I want them to learn, especially by going to Buddhist country, living together among Thais, Burmese, Sri Lankans. Even here in Malaysia also, what they like is very much this trust in the teacher, the Buddha, which is, I always find much stronger actually, culturally speaking, from what I find in these Buddhist countries compared to the typical, little bit intellectual Westerner. Also, you see Asian culture is much more emphasis on being a good team player, a good group player, and being adaptive to the situation. This is something that we Westerners really need to learn. But there are also aspects where, some qualities are also okay that Westerners bring to the table, which maybe some of the Asians also can pick up on. I noticed that some of the Westerners can be very goal-oriented. They're striving quite diligently. Can sometimes be too much of, but generally speaking, they're quite dedicated in their practice. And also they have a bit more of a skeptical or questioning attitude, not taking everything on trust. That is also sometimes can be helpful. So in this way, the different types of conditioning you can learn from each other. And I think it's very helpful and useful. And I would also like to remind everyone that SPS was originally founded in 2000 as a Malaysia nationwide project. And the idea was that for Malaysians, especially Chinese Malaysians, that you don't need to go abroad in order to become a monk. So that you can get actually proper monk training here that fits to your own background, your own climate that is suitable, the nutrition that is suitable, rather than going to a place where many of those supporting conditions can be quite difficult. Not knowing the language, not knowing their culture. So I would also like to renew also that invitation, that old vision of SPS to be a place where Malaysians ordain and train. And I'm very happy currently we have here 3 Malaysian postulants, altogether 4, 1 Westerner, 3 Malaysians who are looking forward to train and ordain in SPS the upcoming period. And it's good to see the Sangha growing, both the Westerners, also locals, and practicing together in harmony. I have also noticed that many places in Malaysia, we have wonderful monasteries already, quite a number. But the facilities for monk training, actually you need some things like a good library, some tools, some electronical equipment can be helpful. Then you need somebody who is very dedicated to monk training, who is organizing courses, workshops, somebody to teach a little bit of Pali, pronunciation, and so many things. So actually not every place will be able to cater to all these different important aspects. And this is where I think SPS can play a small role in that, and it's already happening, that monks or abbots can send the ordination candidate over also to SPS, and then for a certain period gets training here, and then goes back again to his native monastery where he came from. And then again, after maybe half a year, comes back again to again get a refresher dose, like a second vaccine. You get your second shot. So in this way, there can be a back and forth over the first period of the 5 years, the typical training period, where a person can undergo the training, both in his place where he originally comes from, but also with the support of SPS, not only the infrastructure, but also the community, where there are people here, you can ask questions, you have some experts on Bali, others on Vinaya, on Dhamma, Abhidhamma, suttas, early Buddhism. So it's difficult to find this combination, I think. And even though sometimes also our facilities here are becoming quite full, the first preference will always be for locals. How would one anyway know whether one is suitable or suited for ordination? It's actually not so easy to know, because from outside, you don't quite know how monk's life will be. One way is we allow lay people, males usually, if they want to become monks, they can come and join the community for a while and participate in the monastic activities. Basically, they're doing everything together with the monks. So all of them, from starting in the morning for group meditation, chanting, chores, sweeping. They even follow along on arms round, and so on. Together, of course, also with sutta class, Vinaya classes. So in this way, they're getting an insider's perspective of how monk's life really is, rather than just having maybe an imagination from the suttas or from stories that one has heard. But it's always difficult to imagine. So we allow yogis to practice together with us, and that is meant for them to get an understanding whether this is really something that could be suitable for them. And then, if they like, then there could be a chance for later for ordination. Or if it turns out, it's not your thing really, then also at least, maybe that's not the lifestyle I can do or I wish to do for the time being. So let us return to the original question. Are monastics protecting or corrupting the Sāsana? Short answer, yes. Both. It depends. Or a long answer could be that a monastic who strives for the goal of liberation with the fullest of his energy and who maintains a heart of loving kindness and compassion for all living beings and the welfare of others, including the supporting community, and who inspires his co-monastics to practice, and also the laity, likewise, to practice, and who functions as a living reminder for the possibility to strive for the goal and to dedicate one's life for the highest goal, for Nibbana. Yes, such a monastic, I would say, indeed protects the Sāsana. So, I wish for all of us that the number of such monastics continues to increase, and so that the Buddha's teachings will remain accessible and flourish for a long time. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.